When it comes to politicians spreading false information, one in particular might come to mind.
Ronald Reagan loved tariffs.
Money is going to pour into the United States like we've never seen before. To be honest with you, Canada only works as a state. It doesn't. We don't need anything they have. We're spending $200 billion a year to subsidize Canada. I think I was probably the greatest thing that happened to them, but I can't take full credit.
And while the U.S. president might be an extreme example, a lot of viewers might agree that oversight on untruths that politicians say might be a good idea. The question is, how do you regulate it? Joining us now is Toronto MP Karim Bardisi, who sponsored a petition for that type of oversight. Karim, great to be with you this morning. And I should explain to people that MPs will sponsor or present petitions all the time, often on behalf of constituents. But let me ask you about this particular petition, whether you agree with the petitioner, or if you have some thoughts about what your petitioner is trying to do here.
So I generally don't sign petitions, and I haven't signed this one. But I thought it was important. This is clearly an issue that's struck a chord, almost 45,000 signatures. This came forward from someone who I hadn't met until the election campaign started, and someone who had gotten involved because he was inspired by the threats to Canada after the US election. And so he became more politically engaged, and I think he thought that this was something that needed more of a spotlight.
And I should point to people, you can read that we're talking about a petition put before the House of Commons. You can read it at ourcommons.ca. And if you click on participate, you'll see all sorts of petitions. This one is E6679. It's closed. You can't sign it anymore. And Karim, I don't know if you know this, but you're right. 45,000 people have signed it. And that makes it the most popular petition so far in this parliament, more popular than petitions on Gaza or immigration or you name it. 45,000 people is a lot of people. So pretty clearly there's some interest in this. And the petition essentially calls for the government to introduce a bill to make it some sort of offside crime, I don't know what you call it, for politicians who tell an untruth. It seems a bit unworkable, but clearly it speaks to something out there in your constituents, among people who are signing things, that they're frustrated with what they see with Donald Trump or some here in Canada.
Yeah, it speaks to an issue that people talk to us about every day. It might not be the most important issue when you first ask them, how are you feeling about the quality of life, how are you feeling about the government? But you scratch a little bit and people are really worried about misinformation, disinformation. They are worried that their own trust in government or in elected officials may be lessened, and they want to be part of the solution. They want to know that there are ways that they can help reduce misinformation, disinformation. This is an area I worked on before I was an MP at the think tank I used to run, where we looked into policies that encourage people to consume credible news and maybe take with a bigger grain of salt the things that their algorithms are feeding them, for example.
And I think this is the thing. This is something, obviously, journalists get accused of spreading untruths, or we're in the same mix in some ways. And I always come back to, are we teaching our citizens good media habits? And you worked for a bit of time in Queen's Park as well, and I wondered if it ever comes up in education curriculums that provinces might want to pass, that media literacy might want to be more of a priority for those jurisdictions who have some control over curricula.
Absolutely. There's a role for the federal government in making sure our online spaces are safe, and that the major platforms are doing their part. But absolutely, education curriculums have a major role, and provincial education ministries and school boards have a major role. I think in part by making sure that there's a good consumption of journalistic media, but also helping people to hold their elected officials to account, because I think what this petition is about, yes, it's about disinformation and misinformation, but it's also about trust in elected officials. Trust is built between elected officials and their constituents when there's a good two-way street, when elected officials are responding to the constituents and their constituents feel they have a voice, and they're not just having some 45-second clip that patches together a few pieces of information into a story that isn't really true, is being blasted at them online. I think they want to have a more well-rounded conversation, and I think that's one of the things that's inspired this petition as well.
And one of the things, I've been here on Parliament Hill since '05, and in '05 there was a newspaper and a newscast, and you probably consumed your political news on one or the other. But now a lot of political parties, yours, everybody's, is going straight to the voter with Facebook posts or TikTok, and often seeing only one side of it. And so obviously as a politician, you want to advance your own viewpoint and argue for your own side, but then you miss the other side, and we end up in these silos. I don't know how you get around that, because that's the way the system kind of works these days.
Yeah, you know, when I was elected, I always made it a strong commitment to try to present the evidence. I tried to put things forward that maybe weren't always the most click-worthy items, but the things that I thought best represented the issue, or where I stood on the issue, or our party stood on the issue, and maybe some contrast with the other parties. We know that these algorithms are more likely to generate followings based on things that are a bit closer to the line of misinformation and disinformation, things that may have an element of factualness, but then veer into some other direction. And I think it's a responsibility of every elected official to do their part, to try to build trust every day. And that's something I try to do. I used to be a university teacher, and unless you really put the good information in front of people in a really consistent way, the stuff that is a bit more misleading but alluring is going to win the day too often. So I think we all have a responsibility to do better. Well,
Kareem Bardisi, the MP for Taekwon Parkdale High Park, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Really interesting discussion, and we'll see where this goes.
Thank you, David.